There is a city on Earth that makes more money from gambling than the next 10 gambling cities on the planet combined. Not 2, not 5, 10. All of them together. And this city is smaller than Manhattan. You could drive from one end of it to the other in 15 minutes. It pulls in roughly $28 billion a year from casinos alone. For comparison, the entire state of Nevada, every resort, every slot machine, every poker room across Las Vegas, Reno, and every other gambling town in it makes about $15 billion a year. This city almost doubles that. From a place most people outside Asia have never heard of. That city is Macau. It sits off the southern coast of China. You can reach it from Hong Kong by a 45-minute ferry ride. It is tiny. It is densely packed. And the buildings they have put up there will genuinely make your brain stop working for a second. We are talking about a Ferris wheel suspended between two skyscrapers, a surfable wave pool that sits 20 floors above the ground, a hotel that looks like someone punched 3 giant holes straight through it, and at the very top of the list, a building so financially productive that its owners make back every single dollar they spent building it in under 6 months of normal business. Every year after that is pure profit. Now here is the part that makes all of this even wilder. A big chunk of the land these buildings sit on did not exist 50 years ago. Engineers literally pulled it out of the ocean. They pumped millions of tons of sand up from the seafloor, packed it down, and then built some of the most expensive real estate in human history on top of it. Before we get into the buildings themselves, you need to understand how a tiny fishing colony that most of the world had never paid attention to became the richest gambling city on Earth. Because the story of how that happened is just as crazy as the buildings. For over 400 years, Macau was a Portuguese colony. That is why, even today, you will see pastel-colored colonial buildings sitting right next to neon-lit casino towers. It has this strange, beautiful mix of European architecture and Chinese culture that exists nowhere else on Earth. But for most of that history, Macau was just a quiet port town. Nothing special. Nothing that would make you think, this place is going to become the financial center of the gambling world. Then 2 things happened. First, in 1999, Portugal handed Macau back to China. It became a special administrative region, meaning it got to keep many of its own laws and systems separate from the mainland. Crucially, it stayed the only place in all of China where gambling was legal. Think about what that means. China has 1.4 billion people, and there is exactly one legal gambling destination for all of them. One, and it is the size of a neighborhood. Second, in 2002, Macau opened up its casino market to outside companies. For decades before that, one man named Stanley Ho had a complete monopoly on every single casino in Macau. Every table, every slot machine, every chip in the entire city belonged to him. When the government opened the doors to competition, American casino giants saw the numbers and nearly lost their minds. Las Vegas Sands, MGM, Wynn, Melco, and Galaxy all came rushing in with billions of dollars and blueprints for buildings that had never been attempted anywhere on Earth. What happened next was one of the fastest, most intense construction booms in modern history. In about 15 years, Macau went from a sleepy colonial city with a few modest casinos to the single most profitable gambling destination the world has ever seen. At its peak, it was pulling in $45 billion a year, 7 times more than Vegas. In 2024, after recovering from a brutal COVID shutdown that nearly strangled the whole city, it brought in $28.3 billion. And analysts are projecting it will push past $31 billion in 2025. The buildings that made all of this possible cost a combined $25 billion to construct. They sit on land that used to be ocean floor. And every single one of them has an engineering story that sounds like it came out of a sci-fi movie. Here is what we are going to do today. We are going to go through the most jaw-dropping of those buildings, from impressive to completely unbelievable, and by the end, you are going to understand not just what they built, but how they pulled it off, and why nobody else has come close to doing anything like it. If you are already a little bit shocked, hit subscribe right now, because this channel goes deep on the wildest stories in money, engineering, and human ambition. Stories exactly like this one. You are not going to want to miss what comes next. Section 1. When luxury was not enough. To understand how Macau's buildings got more and more extreme, you have to start at the beginning. And the beginning was MGM. MGM was one of the first American brands to arrive in Macau, and they came in with $1.25 billion and a single goal: prove that world-class luxury could work in this place. Not just gambling, luxury. The kind of experience that makes people feel like they are somewhere truly special. The building they put up had a 3-wave glass front, designed to look like the ocean. The architects, a Hong Kong firm, pulled their ideas from Macau's history as a Portuguese sea trading port. At the center of the building sat a huge open atrium called the Grand Patio, with a painted ceiling 25 meters high. Standing under it, you felt like you were looking up at the sky above Lisbon. But here is where the engineering gets interesting. Macau sits on reclaimed land. The ground under most of these buildings is not rock or solid earth. It is compressed sand and silt that was pulled up from the ocean floor. To anchor a 35-story tower on that surface, engineers had to drive foundation columns 40 meters straight down until they finally hit real bedrock. That is deeper than most subway tunnels in the world. The walls were built from triple-layered glass engineered to survive typhoon winds of 250 kilometers per hour. Because in Macau, a typhoon is not a rare disaster. It is a scheduled annual event. Engineers have to design for it the same way builders in cold climates design for snow. MGM took 3 years to build. When it opened in 2007, it made $2.8 billion in its very first year of operation. MGM had spent $1.25 billion and made it back in under 2 years. That kind of return does not happen in normal real estate. It barely happens anywhere. But it happened in Macau, and it happened almost immediately, which is what told every other casino company in the world to get in as fast as possible. Now, once MGM proved that luxury worked, the next question became obvious. What else could work? Could you build for people who were not just there to gamble? That was the question behind Studio City, which opened in 2015 on the Cotai Strip. The company behind it, Melco, made a bold call. They decided to build a resort themed around 1930s Hollywood glamour, all gold and Art Deco energy, designed to look like a movie studio from cinema's golden age. But the real showstopper was something nobody had ever built before. Suspended 100 meters in the air, stretched between 2 separate skyscrapers, was a Ferris wheel that rotated in a figure-8 loop. They called it the Golden Reel. It had 23 gondolas, each one designed in a steampunk style, each one weighing 8,000 kilograms when full of passengers, and the whole thing rotated in that figure-8 pattern, high above the city, with nothing below it but open air and the Macau skyline. The engineering problem here had never been solved before. How do you build a Ferris wheel that connects 2 separate buildings when those buildings move independently in the wind and shift during earthquakes? The 2 towers do not sway together. They move at slightly different times in slightly different directions. A rigid connection between them would crack and fail. So engineers used 3,000 tons of structural steel in a cable stay design, similar to the systems used in suspension bridges, and ran supercomputer modeling on every single joint to calculate exactly how much stress each connection point would face under every possible weather condition. The result was a ride that handles typhoon-force winds without any measurable vibration. The Golden Reel alone cost $150 million to build. Beyond the engineering, Studio City added Batman-themed rides, live shows, and a nightclub. They were deliberately building for families and young tourists who had zero interest in sitting at a baccarat table. And it worked. Annual revenue hit $1.9 billion. Not the biggest number in Macau, but Studio City proved something that changed the whole game. Entertainment could be just as powerful as gambling. You could get people to come and spend money even if they never touched a casino chip. That idea, once it took hold, completely changed what every other builder in Macau was willing to try. Section 2. The buildings that broke the rules. After Studio City, Macau's construction race got truly wild. 3 buildings came next that pushed engineering and architecture further than anyone thought was possible in this context. Each one solved a problem nobody had solved before. The first was the Parisian Macau. Las Vegas Sands had already built the biggest casino building on Earth right next door, and they looked at their own success and thought, France is next. $2.7 billion, 4 years of construction. And at the center of it all, a half-scale replica of the Eiffel Tower, standing 162 meters tall, right in the middle of a Chinese casino resort on reclaimed ocean sand. Now here is what makes this more than just a fun gimmick. The developers did not simply build something that looked vaguely like the Eiffel Tower. They contacted the direct descendants of Gustave Eiffel's original engineering firm and asked for his exact design specifications. Same rivet patterns, same structural geometry, same proportions. 6,600 tons of structural steel assembled to match the Paris original as closely as physically possible. But Paris sits on solid limestone bedrock. Macau sits on compressed sand. Engineers had to completely reinvent the foundation while keeping the visual design identical. They drove 120 reinforced concrete piles 25 meters deep to create an artificial platform of bedrock strong enough to hold 6,600 tons of steel swaying in typhoon winds. Here is the part that really shows how serious they were about getting it right. The original Eiffel Tower was designed for winds up to 120 kilometers per hour. Macau typhoons hit 220 kilometers per hour. Every single joint in the structure had to be recalculated and reinforced, while still looking exactly like the Paris version to anyone standing below it. The cost of the steel for this tower was $45,000 per ton. Standard structural steel costs around $3,000 per ton. They paid 15 times the going rate just to make it look perfectly right. Today, the tower is wrapped in 6,600 LED lights for a nightly synchronized light show. The observation deck sees over 2 million visitors every single year, and the Parisian generates $2.1 billion in annual revenue. The second rule-breaking building was something else entirely: Morpheus Hotel. In 2016, the world lost Zaha Hadid, one of the most daring architects who ever lived. She spent her entire career designing buildings that looked like they were actively breaking the laws of physics. 2 years after her death, Macau unveiled her final completed project, and it was breathtaking. The Morpheus Hotel does not look like a building. It looks like someone took a glass skyscraper and punched 3 massive rectangular holes straight through it, 40 stories tall. The structure holds 770 rooms. There are no internal columns anywhere inside the building, no support beams crossing through the open-air voids in the center, just flowing geometry that seems like it should collapse the second you look at it. What actually holds it up is something called a free-form exoskeleton. This is a steel cage that wraps around the outside of the building, the way a lobster's shell supports its body instead of having bones on the inside. Morpheus was the first high-rise building in the world ever built this way. The entire weight of the structure is carried on the outside, which is what frees the inside from needing any columns at all. The engineering firm Bureau Happold broke the structure down into millions of individual mathematical points and calculated the exact load and stress at every single one. The result required 12,000 tons of structural steel. And here is the detail that is almost impossible to believe. Every single piece of that steel was a unique shape. There were 28 different component types, each one curved differently, each one carrying a load in its own specific direction. Those pieces were manufactured across 6 different countries and shipped to Macau for assembly. The precision required was within 1 millimeter. One piece off by 5 millimeters, and the exterior shell simply would not fit together. On top of that, engineers had to account for Macau's humidity expanding the metal, daily temperature swings shifting the structure, and the building gradually settling into reclaimed land over time. Every one of those variables was calculated in advance. Morpheus cost $1.1 billion just for the hotel structure. It won architectural prizes. Every one of its 770 rooms is a different shape because of the flowing design. Zaha Hadid designed it knowing she might not live to see it built. It became the most photographed building in Macau and stands as proof that sometimes the most impossible-looking ideas are the only ones worth building. The third building from this era is Grand Lisboa, and it tells a completely different kind of story. While all the American companies were flooding into Macau with flashy new ideas, Stanley Ho was watching. This was the man who had controlled every casino in Macau for decades, a complete monopoly that made him one of the most powerful businessmen in Asia. He was not going to let newcomers outshine him on his own turf. In 2008, he opened Grand Lisboa, and he made absolutely sure nobody could miss it. Grand Lisboa is a 261-meter tower shaped like a golden lotus flower, wrapped in over 1 million individual LED lights. When those lights are on, the building is visible from every corner of Macau. Stanley Ho made sure it stood taller than the Bank of China Tower in Hong Kong. That was not an architectural decision. That was a message written in steel and light. The flower petal shapes you see covering the outside are not decorative. They are part of the building's structural skeleton. The entire building carries its weight through that outer shell, which means the interior floors are completely free of columns from the ground all the way up. To make that possible, engineers drove the foundation 60 meters into solid granite rock below the ocean reclaimed ground, 60 meters down. That is deeper than most subway systems anywhere in the world. Every one of the 1 million LED panels has its own power line, its own cooling connection, and its own maintenance access point. 30 full-time workers manage nothing but the exterior light system. Inside the lobby, a 218-carat pink diamond worth over $10 million hangs as casual decoration. Not in a vault, not behind thick museum glass, just there as part of the ambiance. The chandelier nearby is made of crystal and weighs 1,000 tons. That is the same as 7 Boeing 737 aircraft suspended from a single ceiling. The restaurant at the top became the world's highest Michelin 3-star dining room at the time it earned the rating. Grand Lisboa generates $4.1 billion a year and holds the highest revenue per room of any casino in Macau. Stanley Ho spent $2.4 billion to remind everyone who built this city. It worked. Section 3. When they stopped thinking small. Everything we have talked about so far was a single building with a single identity. What came next decided that was thinking too small. Galaxy Macau is not a resort. It is a city inside a city. The numbers are so large they stop feeling real after a while, so let's do this piece by piece. 5 separate hotels under one roof. 9 total hotels now across its phases. Nearly 5,000 rooms. 120 restaurants. You could eat somewhere different every day for 4 months and never visit the same place twice. Convention space the size of 50 football fields. And sitting above all of it, a wave pool generating waves 1.5 meters high. Real, surfable waves. On top of a building. The wave pool covers 8,000 square meters. That is bigger than most public parks. Pneumatic generators buried beneath the pool floor push compressed air through underwater chambers to produce those waves on demand. The engineering team had to make absolutely sure the force of those waves would not travel through the pool structure into the floors of the building below. The pool sits on a custom-built isolation system designed specifically for this project. Nothing like it had existed before. Below the wave pool winds a lazy river 575 meters long, curving through an artificial beach made from 150 meters of actual white sand. That sand was cleaned, treated, and brought in specifically to feel like a real beach. Galaxy Macau does not do approximate, it does complete. The resort was built in phases. Phase 1 ran from 2008 to 2011. Phase 2 added entire new hotel towers from 2011 to 2015. They were building new skyscrapers while the resort was fully operating, adding floors to the skyline while guests gambled on the floors below. Now Phase 4 is under construction, an additional 600,000 square meters of new development scheduled to open in 2027, including a 5,000-seat theater and more hotel brands that have never been in Macau before. The total investment in Galaxy Macau has now reached the equivalent of roughly $5.5 billion US. The group's total net revenue in 2024 hit 43.4 billion Hong Kong dollars. Hotel occupancy across Galaxy's hotels ran at 98% in the fourth quarter of 2024. Galaxy Macau did not build a casino. It built a self-contained world and charged people to live inside it. And it is still expanding right now as you watch this. But as mind-bending as Galaxy is, it is not number one. Because number one is the building that started everything. The building that made every other builder in Macau realize what was actually possible. The building that sits on ground that was ocean water within living memory. Section 4. The building that paid for itself in 6 months. In 2004, Las Vegas Sands made a decision that looked completely insane at the time. They were going to build the single largest casino building on the planet, and they were going to build it on land that did not yet exist. The Cotai Strip, where the Venetian Macau now stands, was not there when this project was announced. It was ocean. Engineers had to pump 6 million tons of sand and silt up from the seafloor to physically create the land. Then they drove 1,530 concrete piles deep into the ocean floor to form a foundation stable enough for what was coming. Before a single wall went up, before a single room was framed, the project had already become one of the most ambitious land creation efforts in construction history. Then the building began, 980,000 square meters of floor space. That is 10.5 million square feet. It is one of the 10 largest buildings in the entire world by floor area. It is bigger than 4 Empire State Buildings stacked side by side. New employees on their first day receive a map of the property because people genuinely get lost inside it. The theme was Venice, Italy. And when Las Vegas Sands says Venice, they do not mean Venice-inspired. They mean Venice recreated. Over 200 artists spent 18 months hand-painting frescoes across acres of ceiling to recreate the painted skies of the Italian city. Life-size replicas of Venice's bell towers, bridges, and arched walkways run throughout the interior. 3 indoor canals, each over 300 meters long, carry real water that is continuously filtered and recirculated. 39 gondolas with gondoliers who actually sing traditional Italian songs row guests through a shopping mall, not a recording of Italian songs. Real gondoliers, singing live, 3,000 suites. Not rooms, suites. Every single guest, regardless of what they booked, gets a suite with a minimum of 70 square meters of space. 350 retail stores line the canal corridors. An arena inside the building seats up to 15,000 people for concerts and sporting events. In 2025, NBA preseason games were held there. BTS sold it out. The Venetian Arena is consistently ranked among the top entertainment venues in all of Asia. The climate control system alone is a jaw-dropping engineering feat. The building runs over 50 separate temperature zones simultaneously, keeping the casino cool, the canals at the right humidity level, the kitchens properly ventilated, and thousands of hotel rooms at comfortable temperatures, all day, every day, without stopping. It took 3.5 years of round-the-clock construction. Workers were on site 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, in rotating shifts. The cost was $2.4 billion. Annual gaming revenue from this one building runs at approximately $5.4 billion a year. That is gaming alone. That does not include the hotels, the restaurants, the arena, the retail stores, or the entertainment. Just the gambling floors. Run that math. $2.4 billion to build. $5.4 billion in gambling revenue every single year. That means Las Vegas Sands earns back everything they spent building it in under 6 months of normal operation. Every year after that is return on investment. Every single year. The Venetian Macau is the most financially efficient piece of real estate ever constructed. It earns more money per square meter than any other building on Earth. And it sits on ground that was covered by the South China Sea within living memory. Now zoom out. Those 7 major buildings combined cost roughly $25 billion to construct. They were built in under 15 years on land pulled from the ocean. Their combined peak annual revenue approaches what the entire GDP of Portugal was at the time. And Portugal was the country that colonized Macau and shaped its culture for 4 centuries. The engineering breakthroughs born from this construction boom did not stay in Macau. The typhoon-resistant glass wall systems developed for these towers now protect skyscrapers across Southeast Asia. The techniques for building massive structures on reclaimed land rewrote coastal engineering standards that are now used globally. The methods used to build Morpheus's exoskeleton changed how architects and engineers think about what a tall building can look like. Macau today has over 45,000 hotel rooms. It has more casino floor space than the entire land area of Monaco. It draws close to 35 million visitors a year. And here is the thing that should really make your brain spin. It is not done. The 6 major casino operators were required by the Macau government in 2022 to collectively invest over $16 billion in new non-gaming projects as a condition of renewing their licenses. That money is being spent right now on new hotels, new entertainment venues, new theaters, new technology. Galaxy's Phase 4 alone is 600,000 square meters. That is another mega resort being dropped into a city that is already the most densely packed entertainment destination on Earth. Macau is also pushing hard to diversify beyond gambling. The government's stated goal is to have non-gaming revenue make up 60% of its GDP by 2028. Whether that actually happens is debatable. One senior casino executive told a journalist in 2025 that there was no way Macau would ever be majority non-gaming revenue. The gaming tables will always be the engine, but the rides, the beaches, the gondolas, the Ferris wheels, the concerts, and the surfable waves are becoming more than just decoration. They are pulling in a different kind of visitor. Families, young tourists, people who fly to Macau specifically to stand inside these buildings and feel something they cannot feel anywhere else. That is the shift that makes Macau's future genuinely hard to predict. For decades, the city sold gambling to gamblers. Now it is selling spectacle to everyone. And if you have learned anything from this story, it is that when Macau decides to build something, it does not build a version of it. It builds the version that makes every other version look small. The Venetian Macau paid for itself in 6 months. Morpheus redefined what a skyscraper can look like. Galaxy built a surfable ocean on top of a building. The Parisian put the Eiffel Tower in China and made it stormproof. What do you think they are going to build next? Because whatever it is, it will probably make this whole list look like a warm-up. If you made it this far, you actually care about stories like this, which means you should absolutely subscribe, because this channel is exactly where stories like this live. Hit the bell so you do not miss the next one. Here is the question I want to leave you with. Macau built all of this in 15 years on ocean sand. They are still building right now. What do you think it looks like in another 15 years? Drop your answer in the comments below. I read every single one.